Hey y'all, Unbreakable here. It is time for another episode of Ask Unbreakable Anything. Disclaimer, I have not, nor will I ever claim to be an expert, a mental health professional, or a know-it-all. I am simply a very vocal survivor. I share my story, I share my experience, strength, hope. I share what I've gone through, what I've overcome, what I struggle with. I share my ups, my downs, my own toxic traits. I share me. That all being said, let's get started. So the question was, what happened to you? I recognized with that question that it has been quite some time since I have actually shared my story. I believe almost a year and a half, I think, since I shared actually the majority of my story. I share bits and pieces here and there, but I know we have so many new followers that that question was certainly perfect timing to go ahead and do that. So I am Unbreakable. That's what I go by around here. I am 52. I am divorced. I have two children. My daughter is 31. My son is almost 17. And I have a grandbaby who's 9. When I was a child. I am the only girl out of 5 children. 3 from my mother and father, 2 more from my father and stepmother. And from a very early age, I knew that my mother hated me. Ugh, she hated me. To this day, I don't know why, other than I was a girl. And it was as though I was competition for her. I always felt like she thought I was competition for her. And how can a child be competition for a parent, right? But I was in some way. My mother hated me. Now, of the 3 of us from the first marriage, we always knew who the favorite was, and it certainly wasn't me. We knew from an early age, and still to this day, we know who the favorite is. I don't remember a time when my parents were together. I believe they separated and or divorced. I don't know exactly. Really early on when I was very young. But things were always bad. I can remember it must have been 4. I was sick. This kind of sick. And I was racing to the bathroom to try to let it go in the toilet, and I didn't make it. And I threw up all over the hallway. And my mother screamed at me. Like, you can't help when when that's coming, you can't help it, right? But that was how my mother treated me. I was always a bother to her. I don't remember my mother ever hugging me. I just knew that she hated me and that I was never enough. I was nothing. Being the only girl, you'd think you were the princess. You'd think that everybody treated you like the princess, like, oh, it's our baby girl. She's our only girl. No, not even close. I had to keep up with the boys. To this day, I still very much have a tomboy streak because I had to keep up with them. If I wanted any attention whatsoever, I had to keep up with them. Things were really bad. And at 3rd or 4th grade, the 3 of us ended up going and living with my grandparents. To this day, we don't know where our mother was. She claims that she was there. We don't remember her there. I know that the 3 of us asked our grandparents where she was. And basically the response was, don't worry about it. So we never knew, but we knew she was never there. So my grandparents essentially raised me for many years, and those are the best memories I ever had. I knew from day one that my grandfather adored me. He was a very stoic man, retired Navy, country, born and raised in South Carolina, very country. But I knew with everything that I was that my grandfather loved me. I was his shadow. Girl, I was the cowgirl. Like, I knew I was going to grow up and be a cowgirl. And I knew my grandfather loved me. I loved sitting on my grandfather's lap. I loved laying down next to his ottoman and chit-chatting while we're watching TV. I knew that my grandparents loved me. It's the only time I ever felt loved in my life. But this started by a family member at that time. I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to say anything. You're just a baby. It started and it began for several years, even after we left my grandparents. So we were there for several years, happiest moments of my life. And then at some point, my mother came and got us and took us back. And that's when hell really set in. It was bad. I can remember my mother beating me constantly. She never beat the favorite. The favorite never got a whooping or beating, but I sure did. I remember at one point my father taking us to Pick and Save, which would be equivalent to what like 99-cent store is nowadays. For, I think, Mother's Day probably. They were, separated, divorced, whatever, for so many years at that point. But for whatever reason, my father decided to take us to go get her presents. And I got some little animal, some little glass, porcelain, whatever animal. Saw it, fell in love with it, knew I wanted that for my mommy. Took it home. She opened it, threw it. I don't even like this shit anyways. That was my relationship with my mother. Junior high rolls around, and by this time I had pretty well stopped. And junior high was hell. It was hell. Living with my mother, going through puberty, not having an identity, knowing at that point, not consciously, but knowing at that point that I was never enough, that I wasn't good enough, that I would never amount to anything, that no one would ever love me. I don't know what came over me, but probably in 8th grade, I decided for whatever reason, I don't even remember why, to go in and speak to my counselor, my school counselor. That apparently, whatever I told her, and I don't remember what I told her, but it was bad enough that they called CPS. CPS comes out, and oh boy, was I punished at that point. Severely punished. My parents had been fighting over custody, come to find out, since they got divorced when we were all very little. Well, at that point, after CPS came out, apparently my mother told my father, fine, if you pay me $10,000, you can have the kids. Only myself and my older brother went to live with my father. My younger brother decided to stay back. So at that point, I knew that my life was only worth $5,000. That was it. That was all I was worth, was $5,000. $5,000 for my older brother, $5,000 for me. That was it. That was the extent of my worth to that woman. Went to go live with my father and my stepmother. They had been married for a couple of years probably at that point, and she is the epitome of a narcissist. Horrific. Textbook. My father is a boy dad. My father has never held down a real job in his life. He had aspirations of being a religious speaker in regards to raising children and healthy families and a team. My father coached everything. So his whole premise whenever he spoke was all about teamwork. And he represented this person in public. And yet at home, he couldn't be bothered with me. Like, he didn't know what to do with a girl. He was a boy dad. He was a boy coach. He didn't know what to do with a girl. So he pretty much just ignored me, left me alone, left me to the hands of my narcissistic stepmother. Oh boy. Wow. There is some additional from my childhood that I have not been able to identify yet. It is buried, evidently pretty deep. But I do know that it has some involvement or something associated to my father. So to this day, I can remember being a child and being uncomfortable sitting in my father's lap. To this day, I can remember being little, very little, and being uncomfortable sitting in my father's lap. I can remember to this day that I was uncomfortable hugging my father. Haven't figured out what those incidents were. Don't know that I ever will. Dealing with already one trauma from childhood, I don't have a relationship with my father anymore. So it is what it is. If it comes up, it comes up. I'll deal with it. If it doesn't, I'm okay. My father never knew what to do with me. I tried everything. I even did sports because he was a sports dad. He was a coach, maybe then I'd get some attention. I did gymnastics all through high school. He went to every meet. He didn't understand any of it. I even played field hockey one season. Hated it, but he was always there. Never knew what to do with any of it. Didn't understand gymnastics whatsoever, but he was at least at every meet. Even when it was out of town, he would try to be there. But here's this man perpetrating himself as such this devout religious man and his wife, and yet she is the most judgmental person you've ever met. Everybody adored my dad. Oh, you've made such a big difference in our lives. Oh, we love you. All these kids loved him. And yet at home, he was a raging alcoholic. And he was beating my brothers. By this time, my 2 baby brothers had been born. He was beating my brothers. The only benefit I have figured out over the years of being the only girl is that I never got beat. But all of my brothers did. All 4 of them. Yet this is the person who's out there praising God, and I'm such this devout Christian, and I believe in family, and here's how you have a good, healthy family. And yet it was all a lie. It was a front. It was a mask. It was fake. So my entire childhood was spent knowing that I was not enough. I was not loved. I didn't know what love was. I knew I was not worthy. Nobody liked me. I wasn't wanted. That was it. Then comes graduating from high school and getting out in the world. I met my daughter's father, the first man who was supposedly head over heels in love with me. Didn't understand love bombing. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't recognize that I was broken. Didn't recognize anything. Didn't know any of it. Just knew that here was this man who showed me he loved me, told me he loved me, couldn't live without me, yada, 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 yada. June of 1990, I married him. And the started immediately. June 30th of 1990 was the day we got married. July 9th, 9 days later, I ended up in the hospital for what they thought was appendicitis. Now, he was military, and so everything was still done behind the times. So I ended up being in the hospital 7 days. They came back to me on day 3 and said, "Ma'am, we are so sorry. One of your tests was put on routine rather than stat. Stat apparently is 3 hours. Routine is 3 days." So here I had undergone general anesthesia, full-blown surgery, took out my appendix. They said my appendix was pretty in pink, nothing wrong with it. They didn't know what was going on until 3 days later when this test came back, and it indicated I had an STD. I don't cheat, never have, but I stayed. The started very quickly. June of 1991, my daughter was born. That relationship landed me in the hospital 3 times with concussions. There was so much more to it, but those were the main incidents that stood out. I finally got out of that in 1998, February 14th. Valentine's Day, 1998. And I thought, okay, that was my experience with, so I'm good now. I'm out. I'm good. You know, that's the only that I knew about was physical. That's all I knew. I'm good, right? Right? I'll never let that happen again. I will never be in another relationship again, right? That's how it goes, right? Fast forward 2004, July 2004, I met my son's father. Talk about love bombing. I didn't know what it was. Here's this new man, and I was enough. I was so much more than enough. I was the best thing that ever happened to him. I was the love of his life. He wanted to marry me right away. Missed everything. I didn't know anything. After my daughter was born, over the years, I had 2 miscarriages. And after the second miscarriage, my doctors told me I couldn't have any more children. My insides were deteriorating. I had multiple surgeries over the years to try to repair and salvage them and correct, and nothing happened. They told me I couldn't have any more children. Well, that appeared to be a challenge to the new. He used to tell me that I'm going to get you pregnant so that you can never leave me. Lo and behold, a year later, my miracle baby comes along. And we barely made it. Both my son and I barely made it. It was a struggle through the entire thing. But during this entire time, I had no clue, but didn't know anything about it. I just knew things were really bad. See, there was very little physical in that relationship. The bruises that I received were on my wrists. And that was when he was cursing me out so violently, he would, hold my wrists so that I couldn't get away. So I had to sit there and take it. So that was the physical that I experienced. And it was bad. For the longest time, I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I didn't understand why I can't make this work. Well, you got crystal meth and some serious alcohol issues going on. It was so bad that he would lock himself in the bathroom for hours, along with his porn addiction. He would lock himself everywhere. Hell, he locked himself in the shed one time. He would lock himself in everywhere and, do what he does with porn and smoke crystal meth in the house. I didn't know any of this. He was a cigarette smoker. So every time I heard a lighter, I thought, oh, he's smoking in the house again. To the extent that he had friction scabs on his private parts. It was that bad. And of course, it was all my fault. I didn't know about the crystal meth, but I knew about the porn and everything that goes along with that. And I was told I wasn't giving in enough. I wasn't giving him what he needed. It was all my fault. That's why he went and cheated multiple times. I got an STD when I was pregnant with our son. Golly gee, wonder where that came from. Of course, that was my fault, but I have never cheated on me multiple times throughout the relationship. I just knew something was wrong with me. What wasn't I doing right? I didn't understand what I wasn't doing right. I can remember standing in the driveway one time, blocking his door. It was open, blocking his door, begging and sobbing, please don't leave. Please don't leave. We were living together, and he would leave all the time and disappear for days on end. I would never know where he was. Well, he was out getting high and at porn shops, doing what you do at porn shops. It was bad. It was so bad. And I left and I came back, and I left and I came back, and none of it did I recognize as abuse. I just knew I wasn't doing something right. And he made sure that I knew I wasn't doing something right. I finally left one time after my son was born, and he told me, I won't pay you an effing dime until an effing judge tells me I have to. Okay. Took him to court. I had to. Now I'm a single mother of 2 children. I had to. And they hit him hard. Like, even back then, it was super hard. Even now, it would be a lot of money. They hit him hard. So, of course, what happens? The love bombing starts all over again. Please, please drop the child support order. I promise I'll take care of you and him and yada, yada. And I fell for it. God, I fell for it. Every time the love bombing and the manipulation and the empty promises came, I believed every bit of it because I just wanted to be loved, because this person said they love me, and I have to hang in there, and I have to keep doing what I need to do to make this work, because this is as good as it gets. This is my one. This is my person. They say they love me. Never recognizing that what I was going. His job finally caught on to the crystal meth and they fired him. So he decided to up and leave and go to Texas. Didn't want anything to do with me, never wanted to see me again. A month later, after being in Texas a month, oh, please, 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 I love you, I love you, I love you. Fell for that. The crystal meth continued. The drug addiction, there were other drugs, come to find out, cocaine, tons of alcohol. At one point, early 2009, he finally decided he was going to go to AA and get sober. And he did. And so he had asked me for the millionth time, would I marry him? And I finally said yes. So being together since 2004, we didn't get married until 2009. And mind you, my son was born in 2005. Things were good for a while. He was sober. He was clean. It was the most amazing relationship I had ever had. Then he picked up the bottle again. And it all spiraled all over again. But now I'm married to him. I have to make this work. I can't have another failed marriage, despite the fact that marriage number one was not my fault that it failed. And marriage number two would not have been my fault if it failed. He made sure I knew it was me. It was all my fault. He drank because of me. He used because of me. He used his porn and went to the porn shops and did the things that he did there. He cheated. All of it was because of me. He treated me the way he treated me because it was my fault. Again, not recognizing what was going on. This went on for some time and it spiraled completely out of control. I had guns drawn, cocked at me, laid down, pointed at me. Had started several years into it. And initially I thought, okay, well, I have to. I'm married. I have to do this. I don't like it, but I have to do this. And I remember the entire time, every single time, it was always his words, you know you love this. Tell me you love this. Years on down the line, I finally started saying no. I finally started begging, please, please, no. I don't love it. I don't like it. I don't want it. But again, something wrong with me. And if I'm not submitting to my husband, I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible wife. I'm the worst person that walks the face of the earth. Resulted in him ripping my insides open. Talked about that several times. Despite me saying no, I had to have emergency surgery to repair the damage that he did. The psychological got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Everything was my fault. Nobody liked me. I couldn't do anything right. Again, I had no clue that him blocking the doorway and me having to stand there because I knew better, don't move, don't flinch, don't breathe, him blocking the doorway and cursing me out so violently that he is spitting at me, that it's as though I can see steam coming out of his ears so violently. I didn't understand that was. I thought, what the hell did I do now? What do I have to fix now? What am I doing wrong now? How can I make this stop? Terrified. I became a shell of a human. I walked around afraid to breathe. Everything I did, I made sure I did for him, because then maybe he'd be happy. Maybe I'm not being a good enough wife. Maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just so damaged that I don't deserve to have this wonderful man love me, not recognizing every bit of it was psychological warfare, verbal attacks. He made sure that everything was in my name. I would have to beg him to transfer money to support the household. I paid everything by myself, to the extent that I went down every payday to pennies in my account. And yet he had thousands of dollars in his. Every bit of it was, I didn't understand that. I didn't know it. January 1st, 2019, our anniversary was December 31st. The very next day, he cheated yet again. Now, right before this, December of 2018, I thought I was such a miserable person. I was so horrible. I was not worth even breathing the air on this planet. I had a plan to commit suicide. Thankfully, I reached out to my doctors and I started getting help. So when January 1st, 2019 came around and he cheated and then came home January 5th, 2019 and told me he wanted a divorce, at that point, all I said was okay. If I thought it was hell before, divorcing a narcissist is even worse. Getting out of this, having gone through what I went through, and my therapist telling me, you've been this entire time. And I'm going, no, he didn't put his hands, like he stopped that a long time ago. Like he hasn't ever put his hands on me again. He hasn't bruised me again. Smacks on the tush hard enough that there were bruises. That's about it. But but he was just playing. He said he was just kidding, that he was just joking. And my therapist kept telling me, everything you've gone through is, and I couldn't identify it. I couldn't put two and two together. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand it. I still thought I'm the worst person in the world. I am broken. I am damaged. I have to save this and salvage this relationship because it's the only one I'll ever have. This is as good as it gets. I don't deserve anything more. This is all I deserve because I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. And this is the only person that I've ever been enough to, even though I wasn't. It took a long time for me to start recognizing the that I had endured. I covered up. I thought, oh crap, this happened and I don't want to tell anybody. We didn't tell anybody. He and I knew what happened. And I came back from the doctor's office, from the surgeon, because I had to go see the surgeon first. What did you tell? What did you tell him? What did you say to him? That I don't know what happened. I told my surgeon, I don't know what happened. Like just randomly, I'm just sitting on the couch watching TV and all of a sudden, snap, my insides are ripped open, right? Right? Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know. Because don't you dare tell anybody. Don't you dare open your mouth and tell people what effing goes on in this house effing stays in this effing house. My son and I knew that phrase very well because it was told to us often. Don't tell anybody anything. Don't say anything. Don't open your mouth. Don't tell the truth. And he was so good at putting that mask on after everything. I would get cursed out, blocked, spit at, and then we were supposed to go have dinner with friends. And here I am, silent as can be. Because I knew better. I knew better than to say a word. So everyone thought I was just this shy, meek, quiet person. No, I was terrified for my life. I was terrified of the punishment that I would receive if I opened my mouth. We were divorced September 10th, 2019. I began my healing journey on my out date, January 5th, 2019. And for a long time, I was silent. I was still quiet. I was still afraid. What would people think? Because, see, I had been conditioned my entire life to know that I was not enough. Nothing I ever did was good enough. I didn't deserve love. I was a problem. My entire life. So how could I open up to people and admit I'm this horrible person? I don't deserve love. Like this was what was impounded, was just pounded over and over again in my brain my entire life. So I don't want people to know that. I don't want people to know that I'm this horrible person that I've been told I am, that I'm the worst wife in the world, I'm the worst mother in the world, I'm the worst daughter in the world. Like I don't want to tell people this, because that's all I believed. That's all I was told. No, it was all my fault. But I did this and I did that and I said this and I said that and I didn't do this when I was told to do this. And that programming that goes on, it is the hardest part for me to get out of. To recognize and be able to embrace the fact that I've always been enough. Always. From the day I popped out of my mama's vajayjay, I've always been enough. Everyone in my life has never been enough for me. I'm 52. It's taken a long time to figure out. It's taken a long time to figure out that none of it was my fault. Sure, I have my own toxic traits. I absolutely do. I acknowledge them. I say them out loud. I tell y'all. I have my own toxic traits. I have my own maladaptive coping skills. I do. I'm a work in progress. But I'm not worthless. I'm not broken. I'm not damaged. And I sure as hell am enough. Healing is not easy, y'all. Reprogramming that brain, reprogramming those records, those tapes, those CDs, those Blu-rays, whatever generation you were born. Reprogramming those words that you hear over and over and over again in your head is one of the most difficult things you will ever have to overcome. I fell in love with myself last year. Just last year, at 51 last year, I finally fell in love with myself. I finally liked myself. I finally believed that I had value and worth, and that I deserved to be treated with decency and respect and caring and compassion simply because I am a human being walking this earth. That everyone else's opinion of me does not matter. That the only opinion that matters is mine and how I feel about me. That I no longer have to live my life according to anyone else's standards or expectations or opinions. I can simply be myself authentically. If you like me, great. If you don't, I don't care. I don't need anyone's approval. I don't need anyone to tell me anymore that I am enough. I don't need anyone to validate my existence anymore. Every bit of neglect, abandonment that I have encountered in my lifetime was never my fault. Ever. Just because I said something or I did something or I responded a certain way or I didn't do it the way you like it or I didn't live up to your No. No more. My healing journey is not a straight road. It's not a flat road. Nor will yours be. There's going to be forks in the road. There's going to be tight curves. There's going to be hills and mountains and valleys, and it's going to be all over the place. Do you remember, I don't know if you did this, but when you were little, when I was little, I would take a pen or a pencil on a piece of paper and just do this, right? And then color, color all the little sections. That's what healing looks like. It's not. It's all over the place. It's going to take you time. It's going to be a battle. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have days where you can't feel a thing and days where you feel everything. You're going to have days where you cry uncontrollably. You have days where you feel like you are on top of the world and you just are surviving and thriving. You're going to be all over the place. I can guarantee you that. But I can also guarantee you that every bit of it, every tear, every step, every drive, every attempt is worth it. Because see, you are enough. You are worthy. You deserve everything in this world. And you are a warrior. That's my story, y'all. What's your next question for Ask Unbreakable Anything? Y'all, go be unbreakable.